Hello, it's Karen, the Weekend Craftaholic. I am back with Moda Blockheads 6 and we're up to week block 23. And this is a big one. The finishing size is 18" and there's kind of three different parts to this one. So I felt really comfortable about this one. I enjoyed the process of it as well. Managed to get it all done in around an hour, and that's from a sewing perspective. The cutting out of all the pieces easily took me 30 minutes. So when we're talking about how much time we're spending quilting, I'm not sure whether you separate the cutting time or the sewing time, because certainly I definitely do those as separate parts of the process. You can see here that I started off just drawing that diagonal line on all of these pieces, and I think this technique's called a square in a square. I could be wrong, or flip and stitch. I've heard lots of descriptions for these, but basically with these are the corner pieces, so we're going to be doing 4 lots of these, and we start off with the sides, but then we're also going to go ahead now and put another one of those pink squares in the other corner, so we've got the pink background fabric on all 3 sides. Apologise if my mouth is a little bit lispy. I've had some dental surgery, so I feel like I'm whistling, so apologies for that. But you can see here, this particular process, it comes together quite quickly. I do like doing this. I did take the liberty of doing an extra stitch line so I could keep these pieces. There's a lot of fabric as well with it being such a big block that I didn't want to waste any of this. I can easily get a 2.5" block out of these, if not slightly bigger. But it's definitely worth saving some of this fabric, especially if you're using really nice fabric. This is just scraps for me that I'm using as practice, but when I come to use a really nice expensive fabric, I definitely don't want to be wasting any of it. So the 4 corners are done. I'm now going to focus on the inside bit, and this is another technique that I absolutely love. It's the pinwheel. And I'm not sure why I enjoy it. These pieces are always small, they're always fiddly, don't always get it perfect, but I do enjoy the process of these and how they come together. They're quite thick to sew as well. Once you've sewn these 4 little squares together, and I think they start off at maybe 2.5". Once you sew these together, they come out quite thick with the seams, so you can see me just pressing them open here, but I probably should start trying pressing the seams open, see if that helps it or not when I'm actually sewing these together. So yes, the finished size of these, they started at 2.5. The finished size should be 2". As you saw then, they're not quite 2". So I'm just snipping off all of these tails, and I'm going to go with it anyway. It's not very often my block does come out the size it should be, but I'm not fazed by that at all at this stage. I just want to get the block done and get it as cute as I can. So this little part of it, this process is quite easy to do. This size is meant to finish at 3.5", and I just went over to my cutting table then to actually do that rather than do it over the camera. Because it was such a small piece, I didn't want to risk not cutting it right. Now this third part of the block, this last technique, I've not done before. So yeah, it's something new for me, which was great. I always like trying something new. This time I did decide to press these seams open, but we basically got 2 large pieces of fabric, and then we're kind of going to turn it into an arrow is the only way that I can describe it. So I've got smaller pieces of the background fabric, and I'm doing exactly the same technique as we did in part 1 in the first block for the corner pieces. These pieces, there's actually 4 of them. These are actually going to go kind of in the middle, so along the sides, vertically and horizontally. You'll see what I mean when the block comes together. But I was a little bit unsure on this particular one because as you can see here, the squares are a little bit bigger than the overall piece now that I've sewn these together. So I wasn't sure whether to line up the fabric with the fabric on the inside where those 2 fabric pieces meet, or whether to do it from the outside, because obviously the square, now that the long pieces have been sewn, they're a lot narrower because the seams that are in the middle of it. And you can see what I mean here where this pink overhangs. I was also a little bit worried because obviously the point is right at the top now of that cut or that block. So I was really worried about if we're trying to have a pointed arrow with this, I'm going to end up sewing it off, which I do end up sewing it off. But yeah, part of me thinks maybe I should have positioned it slightly lower, or I don't know. It doesn't really go into too much detail about that placement. But you see here now what I mean, especially about those ends of that little block that I did, the sides of the cross, if you like. This is where I was also in a little bit of a conundrum. Do I line up these grey pieces so they align, or do I just stick with the block size? Because obviously I could have absolutely lined up the outer size of the block, because they did finish pretty well. I think it was an 8-inch it was meant to finish at, and it did fit it quite nice and snug if I'd have done top to bottom. But then I didn't want my grey arrow to be a little bit skew with and all out of whack, so I decided to not worry about the overall piece, try and line up these grey pieces that are kind of the pattern or the highlight of the block instead, and get those right. Whichever way I'd have done it, I would have done it wrong. I just know I would have done. So you see here, I've done a bit of chain piecing with getting these together, because this is my favourite part of the block, getting it all coming together and seeing how it works. This is where it's a little bit nerve-wracking as well, because although you're trying to line things up as much as you can, and for example I may well have done it on the pinwheel block, when that's connected to the other bits of the blocks, the other units, that's when the truth is told, whether or not it's going to align or not. But I'm pretty happy with the way this block turned out. I think because it was a bigger block as well, it went in my favour. I do prefer to do these bigger sizes, I must admit. And I love this design actually. I have been making a little note on my iPad in GoodNotes with the PDF patterns that I enjoyed and felt confident to do again. So this is definitely one of those that I will do again. You see here where I was talking about the alignment of those blocks. So I had quite a bit of left over. You can also see here now the pinwheel. I didn't quite get that right. So you can see where the dotted grey isn't aligning. The flowery grey and the dotted grey across the cross in the middle is a little bit wackadoodle, but again, I don't mind. I enjoyed the process of it, and I will definitely do this block again. So if you're joining along with Moda Blockheads, I would love to hear from you, and otherwise I would wish you a great weekend. Have a great crafting weekend. Thanks for watching.